and specifically the security
Hold
industry.
on, wait, we're live. Sorry. Hi, now we're live.
Oh.
It ran, but we didn't kick it off. So now we're kicking it off.
Okay.
Hi, welcome to the Unicorn Dispatch Live, exploring the cyber mindset with Bryson Bort, me, your host, and the founder and CEO of SCYTHE. And I'm joined by Dr. Stacy Thayer, who we're going to start off with on telling us a little bit about yourself and what mistakes in life led you to this moment.
Hello again. Hello. Sure.
Deja vu.
Yeah, right. All right, I'm ready. So I'm adjunct professor at Norfolk State University, and where I study cyberpsychology and the security industry. And I'll get to the cyberpsychology piece, security piece, and how I got involved in the security industry, like going way back, further than I'll admit to, when I was like 15, 16, 17, calling local BBSs. And in Boston, we had this really great security scene. It was hacker scene at the time, but they had these 2,600 meetings in the Prudential Mall in Boston. And I would go to them. And, at the time, I didn't really necessarily understand or hacking. This is 1995, 96, right? Like, really, the internet was not quite the thing it is now. Security was definitely not quite the thing it is now. But I was, messing around with BBSs, my Windows machine, dialing bulletin boards, and met a whole bunch of people from there. That then, as I was growing up in Boston, I mean, really, it was the precursor of the security industry. And so when I started studying communications and psychology, and you have to do all these research studies and say, okay, find some people to ask a bunch of questions to. And I look around, I'm like, okay, who do I have hostage here, right? A lot of hackers, a lot of IT people, a lot of technology people. And so my advisor at the time said, there's this new field, and this is now fast forward a little bit to 2001. So the .com boom has happened. Y2K didn't kill us all. We've gotten a little bit more evolved, and she says there's this new field. It's cyberpsychology. There's one journal that exists. People are doing research. I think you should do your master's thesis on this. And so I did. I looked at length of time spent online, because this was back in the day when I was trying to find people who spent time online, and I had to get a group that spent 0 to 2 hours in different age groups. So if you were, say, 60 and spent 6 hours a day online, I was trying to find you. And that was almost impossible to do back in 2000, early 2000, give or take. Whereas now, if I had to find people in their 20s that only spent 2 hours a day online, I'd have to go to Guam or some remote Pacific island, and people who maybe haven't heard of the internet to study now. So that was how I got into cyberpsychology. And then with everybody that I know in security, and understanding the security industry and watching as it grows, seeing the challenges that they face, going, but what makes these people the security industry? When Black Hat and DEF CON, before even Black Hat, when DEF CON is, a couple, 100 people, and then a couple thousand people, and then now thousands and thousands. What does that mean for the industry and the people in it? As those hackers that I was hanging out with at the food court, messing around with or whatever in Boston, are now CISOs. They're now the founders of companies. And so how has that defined the security industry? And for me, what I look at is I look at the people in it and the challenges that they face from a human perspective, as opposed to, say, what's the biggest defense system? What software are you using? What legacy software are you bringing in? How are you designing, the new tools and everything like that? So that is, in a long-about way, what led me to be right here. I mean, there's other things that happen a lot in between them, but when it comes to, what is cyberpsychology, and then why do I pair that with cybersecurity in a way that doesn't traditionally come to sense? You might say, oh, forensic cyberpsychology. Well, okay, forensic, just like forensic psychology, getting in front of the hacker and attackers and being able to understand them, and how, based on this forensic knowledge, do we design either attack points or defense points based on that knowledge. But I think while that is important, there's another piece that we don't delve into, and that's actually the psychology of the defenders and the people that are on the security teams and they're at the forefront of defending these companies and these organizations. Is what happens when we look at how they interact with technology, but also interact with people, because we forget that peopling is really hard, especially when you spend most of your time, or want to spend most of your time, with your computer, and then you're like, now I have to people. How do I people? Help me people.
So specifically how you ended up here, besides your biography, was at the fundraiser at SchmooCon, where we
Yes.
raised
Okay. That's this.
$6,000 for the World Central Kitchen. I wasn't
Yes.
leading with that. That was me just bringing the cap in there to how you showed up here today.
I was going to tell you my
Um,
whole life story. I mean, we haven't even gotten back to my first
no, we wanted the
word.
life story. That Stacy, we wanted the life story. And I think, I mean, you mentioned the reference to Boston and the hackers, and I like to remind people of two things. One is how young this discipline is. I mean, the current modern ecosystem is 2013 with Target. Before that, it was 2000 when firewalls became commonplace. I mean, we're only 25 years into us saying your network should be different from my network.
Mhm.
That's how young we are. And so when we look at these budding offshoots, which ties to the second part of this, which is we see a lot of the focus being on technology. Nerd solutions for nerd problems is the way I phrase it, right? And we keep wondering why, well, we're tackling the technical part and it's not solving it. And you noted it in several ways, because it's, first of all, it's users, it's people using the computers the way they were designed. And then we have these additional components of the defense around that. And then, of course, the adversary, the threat that is trying to do something to that. So let's start with the youth of your own discipline. So when did cyber psychology start to get definitized? What does that look like formally? And then starting to break down the additional aspects of those components.
Sure. It's still in the world of psychology very, very young. And well, just like the internet is, you can only study the internet as long as it's really, been around in a public setting where people have used it. Um, and it's interesting too, as like you said, security is a very young discipline. These technologies are here, and if you look at the internet and how it's just taking over everything from babies to senior citizens, and we don't really understand what that looks like as its impact on people, even just from a longitudinal perspective of research, the impact of studying the internet or being online all the time, we don't understand that. So now we have people in the security industry at the forefront of it, trying to also help all the users within an organization understand why passwords matter, why good security practices matter, why you don't just, even as simple as go to Starbucks, leave your laptop open and walk away to the restroom. Like, these are just little things that to be reminding your average person about for a security practitioner can seem so repetitive. Like, how many times are you still going to complain that you have to change your password? Hang on, let me reset it. Or how many times have you been on a plane to RSA and you can even just see like, oh my goodness, we're on the plane to RSA. This plane should be, locked down tight in terms of good security practices. But yet I can see the, all of the people, either plugged into the internet or even just working on documents that they shouldn't be working on in a public setting. I mean, I live outside of DC. The number of times I've seen somebody working for the government sitting there looking at a document next to me where I'm like, is that really your Homeland Security? Am I supposed to just, be able to be like, so what's going on over there? Like, and I can, but cybersecurity cyber psychology is vast in that it can also mean looking at cyberbullying. It can also mean look at using device usage in kids, or how senior citizens could or couldn't use technology to sign up for COVID vaccinations. Right? If the technology doesn't work, it doesn't help people, and then what's the point on that? And I think even more so as cybersecurity is going and becoming new, everyone's looking at what the new technologies are, and we forget about the people, especially because security. I mean, from the time that we were grunting and throwing spears around the fire, in our cave, somebody was out there being security, and that's evolved. And so you had your perimeter, you had your little brush fence you had there, and somebody was watching it, but you wouldn't put those people up and not have them sleep, or not have them take watch at certain times, or not check, did you eat, are you okay, are you physically fit to fight the dinosaur that's going to come by. I mean, history and all of that is not my forte, but now here we are at the front of technology when we don't really even understand how it's being used and new technologies. I mean, for people in the security industry, we should be thinking about how their mental health is doing, or at least their behavioral self-care, because they're dealing with a lot of new things that they're learning to understand, that they have to keep ahead of. And then also just work-life balance. I mean, that's the greatest defense that's out there. These people who are at the forefront of the organization.
Okay, so let's start talking with, of course, security is defined by the threat. So let's talk about the psychology of the threat. Why do these people do what they do, and how can that help us?
So it varies. It's like saying, why does a serial killer kill, right? I mean, this is where forensics, they all have their own different reasons, and you can look for patterns in that behavior. And the discipline, if you've ever seen like Manhunter on Netflix, or, read any of those books, or, I used to want to be a forensic psychologist at one point. So I got, big into it. Like, I think I thought I was Jodie Foster until I thought that through and was like, that doesn't end well for anybody.
Silence of the hackers.
Yeah, that, yes. Yes. Somebody call Anthony Hopkins. So the problem is that the reasons and motivations are always changing, and they're always evolving, and it will vary based on, are you looking at an individual? Are you looking at a nation state? Like, what are the motivations behind them? And I'm looking at and understanding those motivations. What I do is I work with my students. And so like when I teach forensics, or if I'm doing an intro to cyberpsychology, and we have the forensic time, I always ask them to profile a hacker, but also their motivation, because to understand it, that hacker in the black hoodie, that is everybody as far as most people are concerned. That is the hacker. That is the only one with motivation out there. And if you can figure out why they're wearing a black hoodie, well, better on you. Maybe you understand them a little bit more. Apparently, that's the key to understanding attackers. And it's not, because when they start to peel behind it, I love this kind of aha moment with a lot of my students. In addition to usually having to read, 6 or 7 papers on Kevin Mitnick, I've also got a lot of papers that are in there going like, wow, I didn't realize there was hacktivism. I didn't realize that somebody was doing something that, MIT got hacked because somebody believed that the research that researchers do should be public information to people. Why did WikiLeaks start off by existing? Why do these people do the things that they do? And it's not usually just for the lulz. Sometimes it is. And then so we have to look at each attacker and say, what bucket do they fall in? How do we profile them, just like we would with forensic psychology? And then how do we build a model of why they would attack, and then try to counteract that by knowing what we know about them, either their motivation, either their goals, or anything. But it is very hard, because not only are you just trying to look at why human behavior is the way that it is, it's the axis of human behavior and technology. And that's hard for most people. They're either really good at peopling and not so good at the technology, or really, vice versa. There are the people out there that are good at both. And I love those people. I am not those people, but I know, the ones that I know are very special. Unicorns, one might even
say. So you brought up Kevin Mitnick, and I think that's also a good segue into, so people do things for a lot of different reasons, as you mentioned. And this is part of where we have, also, again, relatively new within the discipline, is the penetration testing, the red teaming, purple teaming, doing it together, where we want to be able to emulate or simulate those behaviors. And there's a certain amount of that mindset that's necessary. A lot of it, when I look at the whole scope of things, is a concept of imagination, because in defenders, part of it is time, part of it is resource, but part of it is also just, why would somebody have thought to connect those things? My favorite story of that one is the one of the fish tank, where the Iranian Revolutionary Guard was able to hack the Sands Casino through literally the IoT sensors in a fish tank and jump into the core network and cause over $50 million in damages. So what are the takeaways from Kevin Mitnick, who's a little bit more slide toward the blue, particularly once he went to the white hat side, from his career, that you teach in your classes?
Mm-hmm. So with Kevin specifically, what it becomes is, why could he do it? Was he looking to set out something, to take somebody under, or was it for, can I do this? What happens if? The greatest hacker question. What happens if I do this? Right? And that really becomes the root of it, is exploration. Even if it's just in high school, when that's one of the the favorite stories, when you get a bunch of hackers around the good old campfire or whatever, things that they did when they were younger. But then what happens is it was a lot easier to break into things back in the early 2000s. than it is now. So what Kevin was dealing with is, okay, what was the situation where Kevin was able to do things, where he was able to walk in and out of things, where he was able to break things a lot easier than it is now. Now, the 0 days that people could drop all the time, they exist. There's bug bounties, obviously, it's a thriving part of the security industry. But it's different where back in the time of Kevin, they could just kind of look through and he really made people aware of why cybersecurity has to exist. And so that is the really good seed that gets planted of why did the industry evolve the way that it is? Why does the average person care about cybersecurity? And Kevin is kind of that gateway into that, because a lot of people have either heard from him, read his book, or they're at least familiar, which is why when I'm doing the intro class, I get so many undergraduate papers about him because he's a very low-hanging fruit because of the way the world was then in terms of the security industry. Now, it's a lot harder. You have to look for ways to get in. You have to study your prey in a way. And so that means organizations have to take a look and say, why would somebody come for me? Why did the Sony breach happen? Was it really, because of a movie? Was that the reason for calling enough attention to it? What was the reason for an attack? Was it because they could? Some of the smaller organizations, colleges and universities that have been hacked. Everyone thinks that they come from these big, giant organizations like a Sony, but it doesn't always come to that. Sometimes it's the smaller ransomwares and the ways that they can get through in the non-obvious ways. I mean, remember when Barnaby Jack hacked the ATM and everybody just, oh my gosh, like that. And then pacemakers and cars, and hacking became more and more commonplace with things that we use in the Internet of Things. People began to see all of the ways that we could be at risk and the ways that we personally are responsible for making sure that risk doesn't happen.
R.I.P. Barnaby. I know he had a huge impact on a lot of folks. We worked an engagement with a large bank where we had to hack an ATM. And the funniest part about this story is that it was easier to hack the ATM than to build the board demonstration where they wanted us to shoot money out, because the O-Day was simple. What was complex was figuring out the engineering limits of the rollers to actually spit it out to get the Hollywood effect.
It's little things.
So sort of wrapping up that piece here, we have a question that kind of ties this all together, because while there are many different reasons that folks are serial killers, part of what ties into like the mind hunters and the forensic psychology are the archetypes. So can you give us some insight into what those archetypes are, how they're formed, and how we can use that?
Sure. So there's not quite to my knowledge, and I haven't gone down the deep rabbit hole of forensic profiling in this, but when I look at attackers, so I look at them and say, like, so nation state or their government, that one goes fairly deep. Just because I can, you're going to see a lot of those. I mean, that's when I've worked for non-security companies, just either development companies, and I've said, okay, we're going to Black Hat. Think about everything that goes through on okay, don't bring your computer to the show floor, like all of the different things. And I've had sales teams that I've worked with that are going there for the first time. And I'm like, no, really, I'm not just being crazy. I mean this. Like, don't walk around with your show. Don't scan all the QR codes. Stop scanning the QR codes, right? Like, and I forget how differently or what I'm used to, right? Like in terms of just things that seem second nature. And that's always a good refresh reminder. So, and then the human hackers, right? Everyone from my Facebook got hacked again, or somebody's pretending to be me. And that could be everybody from your grandparents to, I don't know if it's when you saw Rich Mogul gave a talk about how to help your family members with cybersecurity. And I was talking with, I think it's Chris Weissopa, and he's like, I can definitely use some of the stuff with my mom and with my, with my mother-in-law. And I'm like, these great cybersecurity minds. And we're attending this awesome talk going like, how can I help my in-laws with cybersecurity but those are the ones, the low hanging fruit. So there's the ones that will really work, and they've got sometimes a team. And so you've got these groups, so they're not the individuals. So you have to look at things when you're looking at, say, an individual or a group. What's the MO of those people? I also will look at, if we do know this, but where do they come from and what is the age? Because there's a lot of people trying to get into the hacker industry. I say that specifically, not less so the security industry, because I think there's ways to do that in mentoring, but people that want to show up and have that name. They see these security rock stars. They want to be part of that. And so they're on these groups, and it's very easy for older people who, if they got caught doing something, the penalties would be much more severe, to reach out to younger folks, people in a younger generation, and say, here, let me teach you some hacking tricks. And then here, go around and play around with that. So mentorship in attackers is something that I always look for. Like, where did they come from? Are they coming from different, if they're coming from different governments, what is their history? Where do they come from? What, above all, is the motivation? And that's how you classify them, as the different motivators behind, okay, I'm going to think about the way that somebody thinks, if they're from a government organization, if they're from a particular region, they're from a particular age, a particular background. And so it's looking at a lot of those factors, but it comes down to motivation and looking at what is considered low-hanging fruit, either with a human or within an organization.
And that ties into now the threat intelligence of how we're looking at that, because it's, a threat isn't a threat until somebody has motive.
Mm-hmm.
Then they have to have capability. I have to be able to do something with this. And then, of course, the part that we control on the defensive side is opportunity surface area. You can't hack what's not there.
Yeah.
So looking at the breeding grounds, I'm going to phrase it that way, for where these folks come from. What do we see? I mean, is this something that comes from desperation? Is this go back to the OG hacker that I think a lot of us understand, which is the passion and curiosity? Is it financially motivated? Is it just everybody in all different types, or do certain types of those have a predisposition to be more going into a criminal enterprise, or versus joining a foreign military operation?
So I'm going to compare that to, say, like, let's say again, crime that happens, say, face to face, right? So an attack can happen, and there are things that we can all do for defense. So it could be, okay, this motivation, this might happen for financial reasons, because there's a big vulnerability. There's people that will pay on the black market for 0 days. That's why I'm going to do it. In the same way, a shooting could be financially related because it's gone on for maybe a drug deal or something. And that's that type of crime. And then there's other types of crime. So say, okay, again, as you said, looking at that motivation, looking at those types of people, but you can make sure that your house is always locked. So that way, somebody looking to steal from you, somebody looking to attack you personally, whatever their motivation, there's generic things that can be put into place to protect you. So you want to take a look at those two. Are we generally protected? And then to look at those motivators, say, okay, so now let's look at the different types of crime that are out there. Am I protected from somebody that wants to hack my information personally? Well, my passwords are pretty good. I change them. I use multi-factor authentication. So our own personal hygiene for it. So it's looking at these, what's essentially different groups of these types of crimes. And you can't just say, okay, I use multi-factor authentication, therefore I am safe from China, I am safe from Russia, I'm safe from all these places because I have good password hygiene. Okay, that might save you from your personal attack, but let's go to that type of attacker. So that's what when I'm working with organizations as well, saying, all right, where do you hang out? If you don't hang out in, okay, so growing up in Boston, I know not to walk down, on the Hill or Beacon Street at midnight, or maybe 1 or 2 in the morning, because I know I have that wisdom not to put myself out there. That's what organizations need to have too. And that comes down to the profiling, knowing who's out there, knowing what you have that people might want to have, knowing what your profile is, and to view yourself the way an attacker might look at you. And that's, I think, what we do is a lot of times we look at the way that what motivates attackers, but we can't necessarily control what motivates attackers, because there's always going to be something new. And so when we're thinking about the psychology of the attackers, I think we get lost when we can think about the psychology of the defenders too. I mean, we think about self-defense, just even in a physical form. If you take a self-defense class, they tell you attitude is such a big portion of that. The way you carry yourself if you're walking down the street at night, the way that, the people you talk to, like we have what we call common sense capabilities to protect ourselves from dangerous situations. organizations need to look at that and look at their people. And so I say, like, when I bring up burnout, most people don't talk about burnout, but it's like, yeah, you have somebody who's monitoring your network and they're burnt out and tired and they're not looking for things where they miss something. Well, your technology is only as good as the mental well-being of the people who are monitoring it then.
Yeah, so this is another key point. So there are really only two technical controls on the defensive side. Prevention, which is what everybody would want, right? Why can't I stop something? But the problem is being able to stop something means you need to be very confident you're stopping the right thing. Like you don't get 3 strikes when you block something that's legitimate, because your job is advisory and more of a like assurance for somebody who's doing the thing that is the mission or driving the revenue. You break their stuff, you're fired, right? Like that's not an option. So prevention is very hard to do and is very limited. The primary technical control we have is detection. My ability to see something, send an alert, and then tying into what you just said, Stacy, having a human operator now intercede, interpret the alert, and to do something in a time period that can minimize impact and dwell time. And so realizing that our primary controls really come down to people, because it is the tuning that's doing it. I know everybody's waiting for artificial intelligence to take this all over. Ain't happening yet.
Yep.
So it's people. It is people who are tuning. It is people detection engineering, and it is people who are responding. And so now, when going back to what I described, is the threat is, again, motive. I want to do something. Capability. I have the ability to do something. And then the part that we control, which is opportunity, right? Our surface area. This is us. Now you started to tie that into the psychology of opportunity, what we present. Right. So let's talk through that in more detail from a personal level, like in our individual lives. And then, as you mentioned, burnout, the managerial, and back to the overall enterprise mindset and what we can control to make ourselves better defenders.
Yeah. So to me, well, like you said, right, is that until the AI overlords are coming, then it's us, right? It's people. And a lot of the CISOs that I've talked to have changed the narrative to, it's not when a breach will occur. It's not if a breach will occur, it's when a breach will occur. And to be able to have the infrastructure in place and to set the expectations of, a breach is going to happen. So let's all get on the same page about that. And how are we going to handle it so that when that happens, we're prepared for it and we're putting stock in our people, and so that there's an action. And I like it when I see organizations that are looking at their people and saying, okay, we are the defense between the organization and any attackers. All the stuff, we can understand the attackers. We can kind of goes back to that. What can you control, them or you? Well, it's a lot easier to control the choices you make than it is to control the choices other people make, though we try. So looking at yourself and looking at the people within your organization and thinking of it from human perspective and human fallibility. And that dare I even say it, compassion and empathy, which as soon as I start bringing out those words, you lose so many people. I mean, even when I've tried to talk with you, the peopling, I don't know that. I don't feelings, emotions. I don't know. I've had people walk out of conversations with me about that. I don't want to talk about any feelings or anything. Just give me the talent.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's partially because, I mean, this field, again, the psychology of this field are folks who are not well known for their social skills. And it's not that they lack empathy, but I think that they find it as a bit of a scary unknown. And the way I like to frame this, again, going back to the way I keep framing where we fit in the picture of an organization, is it's empathy for the users, but it's partnership with the business. Right. And that requires understanding and that requires relationships. That's how things get done.
Yeah, because you get buy-in. And when somebody understands why they're doing something, they're much likely from an organization to partner, to be part of that. And that sometimes means looking them in the eye and saying, okay, you're not going to leave your laptop unattended because of these reasons. And not just a YouTube video that comes in your annual training that people are watching on YouTube at fast forward and not really even taking in, and then taking the easiest test in the world and checking a couple of boxes. That doesn't qualify, because then it's like, well, what's going on? And so the other thing is managers, a lot of times they get put in because they've learned technical prowess. They understand the way the organization works. They get brought all the way up to be managers, to be CISOs, but they haven't actually been given leadership or management training. And they want to be good leaders and managers. They do know about empathy. They do want to have empathy, but they don't know how. What does that look like? It's awkward. Does it feel awkward if I'm in my one-on-one and say, how are you feeling? Like that feels really awkward to some people, and it can be very hard to get over that. But there at least needs to be that understanding between the people in the team. Okay, you're going to do your job and do my job, and everybody's okay. And we'll bring up something if there's something wrong, versus having somebody sit there and fester and be unhappy. And then, I've watched the heist movies. It starts with a disgruntled employee. I've seen now
opportunity.
Right?
We said this in the intelligence community. I can't create an asset. I can only harvest one.
Yeah. Well, and you find somebody can be financially motivated. Look, Jurassic Park would have gone a heck of a lot different if they paid their IT guy, right? That's always the running joke, right? If they had done that, it would have been a very different movie. Disgruntled employee. So when CISOs and people in security, that's the thing. It's not a very recognized job in terms of thanks for not getting hacked today. We appreciate it. Most people don't, and that's why it becomes often thankless. And so I'm starting to squirrel a little bit, because I talk to a lot of people that are suffering from burnout, and that there's not a lot of relief for it, and not always having that understanding to be able to go to your boss and saying, look, I don't have it in, like, the way that I am right now. I don't have the ability to be out there monitoring things. I'm distracted. I have this thing going on in my life. I have a sick child. I have a sick spouse. I have my partner and I had a fight this morning. I'm distracted. We can't always walk into an office and say that, but at the same time, to have that awareness in ourselves is important, because you have to know when you're not operating at 100%, because none of us operate 100% all the time. So what do we do when we can't? Because there's always those people that are out there. The attacks don't go away. As you said, we're not solving it anytime in the immediate. We're just trying to kind of keep up.
So burnout, this is something I'll speak from personal experience. I didn't really understand. I was always kind of like, oh, yeah, I get it as a manager, as a leader. It's something I need to be aware of. And the people have limitations, but I don't have limitations. I can do anything for forever. And I can remember the exact moment that I burned out. I remember it very clearly, because it was a weird feeling. It wasn't just an emotional feeling. Like, there was a physical component to it as well. Like, I actually could tell, like, I had hit like the little bedrock of my being. And I'm West Point Army officer. I've done a whole lot of things. I was always trained, you have no limits. You just keep going until literally you just can't. And it was a shocking revelation to experience that. So now I have a lot more empathy for it, because I've actually experienced it. So I understand what it feels like. What can we do to, like, what causes it exactly? Like, of course, everybody understands workload, but it's not like the work can go away. So how do we as managers, how do we as enterprises manage burnout better?
So much of it comes down to recognizing people, seeing them. How powerful is that when someone says, I see you, right? Like, feeling recognized. I don't recommend saying that as your manager. I see you. It gets a little creepy, but
I felt like, Stacy, it felt like you were about to say, I see you, and here's a pizza party.
Yes. Hugs for all, award participation trophies, and we are all good, right? Like, that doesn't go for everybody. But so what's interesting with burnout is it actually, when you look at the definition, it's filed as is caused by interpersonal interactions. So not just the work. The hope is that you went into this field because you enjoy computers, or there's something about this that you love doing, that you decided to do, as opposed to becoming a doctor or a police person, or whatever it may be. There's something about this that you enjoy, and you have some efficacy around your ability to do it. What happens when we get burnt out is there's loss of meaning. Is really one of the number one reasons why, is you're not getting a return on your investment of self, your investment of time. You're putting yourself into these things, and it can be financial reward. It can be social reward. I really like the people I work with. That's why I stay at this company, or the benefits are good, or they care about me, or you've got to have some reason for why, even in your personal relationships. Why are you there? And unless they're kids, that doesn't count. You don't get to get out of that one.
To be fair, some folks who work in this space act like kids.
Fair. I agree. It's good training. So when, as a manager, you can recognize, like, okay, you may feel like, yes, we need to hire more people. I hear that we are short-staffed and you are tired because we don't have the budget to hire more help. It can feel frustrating because there isn't a solution for that. And you as manager may feel, yeah, I know what your problems are, but there's nothing we can do. I can't get more budget. I'm a middle manager. I can't go to the CEO. I can't go, I'm just trying to work all these different relationships. But when we feel like we don't matter, and so my dissertation was on employee engagement and psychological safety. So this is even just if you even take away the cyber pieces of it altogether, there are numerous studies that show that employees who are engaged in their work perform better, and they experience psychological safety, which means I feel comfortable coming to you and making a joke, or coming to you with an idea, and you won't laugh me out of the office. You won't judge me for it. Why did I hire this person? That was the dumbest idea ever. I mean, there's anxiety for a lot of people too about their people that they work with, and having that psychological safety. Can I take my kid to work? I mean, think about like remote work and how much that relieved people just to be able to run a few errands. The great debate, So what it comes down to, going back to the empathy piece, if you're saying, all right, so I know I've been burnt out. How do I manage burnt out? How do I manage this with my employees? What do I do? Be genuine in it and be able to reflect on your own personal self too. That put your oxygen mask on first, because you have to know who you are. You have to know your personal strengths and your personal limitations, and have that honest conversation. Because I think when people can bring themselves and be their authentic selves and say, okay, I want to do my best here. I want to give an idea. I want to matter. And even if it's, I know we can't hire more people, but I want you to hear that I'm in need, and I'm hurting here because I'm trying to do 5 different jobs, none of which were the ones I was actually hired for, because things have changed and there's legacy software that I don't know how to use, and the person who used it just left, and I'm freaking out over here. To be able to ask for help, or to be able to raise their hand and say, or a manager to be able to say, I know you need these things. I would love to get them for you, but what can we do as a solution? What works together? Oddly enough, I don't know that we problem solve about our balance together. Everybody's kind of left to their own abilities to juggle work life. But I don't know if you ever had, so I used to work at Software Etc. in the Prudential Mall, back at those 2600 meetings. And it would be, hey, I want to go to something this Friday. Can you cover my shift for me? And that was, again, a much younger age time, different time of life. I know as, CEO, you can't be like, hey, can you cover this for me? I'm out. I'm going to go, but we can still cover for each other. We can look at a team. If you were going back to that around the campfire piece, and you're guarding your little area of the bush fence away from whatever's going to come and get you, you need to make sure that all the people that are protecting that fence and that perimeter are doing okay. You're a team. I think we forget that. We forget about each other's humanity so much, and our own honesty and our own limitations. And I'll finish this. Have you ever seen that? It's a cartoon. It's got the, I think it's the man holding over the cliff, and the woman's like this, and he's got a boulder on his legs, and he's like, why doesn't she climb up? And she's got like a snake or something about to eat her arm off. And he's like, why isn't he pulling me up? Because they can't see what's going on behind the scenes. And even if we just kept that in mind.
Yeah, that's a lot of where I see a breakdown in agile development. Is the daily check-ins aren't just meant to be the taskmaster, like, are you completing your story? But they're supposed to also be like, hey, I'm stuck. Hey, I'm struggling. Hey, something's going on. And it's meant to be the team having that visibility together on whether it is a technical roadblock, a personal roadblock, or any of those challenges, that we can overcome it together. And instead, what I see the default kind of being is like, you just sort of let it go around. It's like, yep, still working on it. Still working on that. People don't communicate. People don't ask for help. And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of folks, is asking for help is not a vulnerability.
Right.
Asking for help is actually part of your job. It's not that you're expected to do everything, but you're the expert in you. You're the expert in your task, and saying, hey, I need something for this. Or life happens. I'm a human and I need something for it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would want somebody to come to me. Like, would you rather someone raise their hand? Like, as a manager, don't judge people for asking for help. That's the other one. I mean, I've had people say, someone was taking off a lot of work, and I said, well, maybe you need a mental health day now and then. Nope, doesn't exist. Uh-oh. But that if someone comes to you, I would want somebody to ask for help because they weren't able to do something than to just try and do it and do a lousy job.
Yep. And that ties right in here. So we have the comment, we as managers, and I believe this is from Jennifer Leggio, need to be able to see when people are burnt out and proactively give employees space to care for themselves before they have to ask. That has gone a long way, right? So this is the managerial side of, we can have, like I described, Agile has built-in stopping points or establishing that visibility, but the manager can also help create a culture of safety, and one where you feel less vulnerable and you do feel supported being able to do this.
Yeah. And sometimes I tell you one of my stories, and this comment that she makes is absolutely essential. And I had a manager, she knows who she is, where my daughter, so she was on the second floor. My daughter flipped over the stairs and landed on her back, falling 8 feet from the second floor to the bottom floor. She did not break her back. She was not hurt, but it was incredibly traumatizing for both my daughter. And then of course for me, she flipped over. And I was telling my boss about it, saying, this happened. I just want to let you know, my daughter's home today. She fell down, 8 feet after falling off the railing of the set of stairs. She said, take the day off now, like go be with your daughter. I was like, I can do that. And when she said that, it was like, oh my God. And I went and I was with my daughter, who again, been very, and it meant so much to me, but she had been able to see that and said, you need to go be with your daughter right now. Don't worry about me and the work that you have. Like I know you'll get it done. Take that time with your family. And that meant so much to me, that she acknowledged that, of like, you're right. Like I should be with my daughter who's hurting and scared and sore, and thankfully not in a hospital and broken back and all of that. And like the fact that my manager saw that in me and gave that to me, like that in turn made me want to work harder, brought that out of me of like, wow, I am so grateful for this. And there's reciprocity. When we are treated well, we want to treat people also well. And that stands for organizations. When you have a manager, they say people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. It's one of those sayings, right? And that's where burnout comes in as an interpersonal piece, because you have to find a way into those and navigate those emotions. And it's okay to say, I'm not comfortable asking people how they feel, but then find a workaround so that if somebody is unhappy on your team, they have a way of expressing, I don't like the way things are done, or because it does not go away. It's not, if they don't like it, they can leave. They won't leave. They'll stay there. They'll get in everybody's ear complaining about everything. And your team can become toxic because they will need to be heard in one way or another.
So we've covered the psychology of the threat. We've covered the psychology of the black into white hat, the red. Mm-hmm. We've covered the psychology of the blue, and now we've covered the psychology of the workforce. What would you do to wrap all of this together, and where would you direct folks who are interested in getting more information? Are there academic journals? Are there websites? Are there other folks? Are there things that you do that they can follow up for more information as well?
Sure. So you can always get in touch with me either at LinkedIn or drstacythayer.com. And so, there's some research that's out there. It's hard because, again, the cybersecurity is such a moving place. If you want to publish research, you're looking at it from almost, a year behind. You've gone through an IRB, and I won't nerd down that rabbit hole for a second. But yeah, you can always message me. There are Christine Maslach. She actually spoke at RSA. She was a keynote at RSA. She writes a lot about burnout and created the burnout inventory that I've used in my research as well. She's got several books out there. And is a great resource for reading about things. There is a lot about burnout in the security industry, less so academic research again, but even just today I was reading about a new report that came out a couple weeks ago that the studies have been done 6 months ago or so. But again, talking about how 50% of the security workforce is anticipating burnout. So they're going into 2025 going, yeah, I have plans to be burnt out. I mean, not officially, but they know it's going to happen because either of things that they have going on in their life, about the political climate, about the regular climate, you want to name it, life is happening out there, and they know that their jobs may not be relieving them anytime soon. So we covered a lot of different psychologies. I don't know if I missed anybody out with out there, a lot of buckets, but acknowledging, step one, acknowledge that burnout is real and understanding what it is. And even if you don't experience it, believe that other people are. You don't necessarily have to experience it to know, oh, okay, that must, that must be really hard. I've never broken my arm, but I believe someone if they tell me their broken arm hurts. We can do that on a mental capacity as well.
Well, Stacy, thank you for joining us today. And for the rest of you, if you're interested in more, we did one of these last year with Dr. Mary Aiken, also on cyberpsychology. And tune in every month for your catch up on your Unicorn Dispatch Live. Thank you.
Thanks all.